All right, today we're cracking open an intelligence brief on a force that is quietly but powerfully shaping our world: billionaire philanthropy. You know the story. We've all heard it. Some titan of industry makes an unbelievable amount of money and then pledges to give it all away for the good of humanity, right? It's a great story. It's a story of redemption, of generosity on a scale that's hard to even imagine. But what if that's not the whole story? The material we've been digging into suggests something else entirely. It paints a picture of a system where these mega gifts, they aren't just charity. They're strategic moves in a much bigger game. A game where influence is the prize, the rules are written by the rich, and you, the public, are footing a huge chunk of the bill without even knowing it. Okay, let's get into it. So first, to really get what's going on, you have to understand the sheer scale of this thing. We are supposedly living in a golden age of giving. But what does that actually look like in real numbers? Well, the number of these private foundations has just exploded. In the US alone, there are now over 85,000 of them. To put that in perspective, that's more than every single McDonald's on the entire planet. And what's really telling is that almost half of them popped into existence since the year 2000. That's a massive acceleration. And the amount of money we're talking about, it's just staggering. These foundations control a combined $865 billion. But here's where it gets weird. Here's the paradox. For the billionaires who signed the giving pledge, promising to give away at least half their wealth, their collective fortune has actually more than doubled since they made that promise back in 2010. It's gone up 138%. So that begs the question, right? How are you giving your fortune away if it's actually doubling? So that leads us right to the heart of this brief: the hidden public cost. Because here's the thing about all this generosity. It isn't free. In fact, there's a very good chance that you are helping to pay for it. Let's just put it as a direct question. When a billionaire puts $1 into their own foundation, how much does that cost the public? In lost tax money that could have paid for roads, schools, whatever. The answer, according to some really deep analysis, is a jaw-dropping 74 cents. No, that is not a typo. For every single dollar a billionaire puts into their private foundation, the public chips in 74 cents. How? Because that donation lets the billionaire avoid a whole cocktail of taxes: income taxes, capital gains taxes, estate taxes. It's a massive public subsidy for the private passions of the ultra-wealthy. So who's actually cashing in on this deal? Well, this chart here lays it out perfectly. It's the wealthiest 10% of households who even have enough deductions to use this tax break. Meanwhile, the other 90% of us, who mostly just give what we can directly to charities in our towns, we get no tax benefit. But we're still subsidizing the tax breaks for the rich. So think about that. The public pays, but only a tiny, wealthy sliver actually gets the reward. Okay, so how does this all actually work? How do they move this wealth around to get all the tax benefits while maybe delaying the public benefit? Let's break down the playbook. The super rich have two main tools in their toolbox. Over on the left, you've got your classic private foundations. Think of them as charities that are controlled by the donor. They have some rules, they have to pay out a little bit each year. But on the right, that's the real game changer. These are called donor-advised funds, or DAFs. You can think of them as charitable investment accounts, but with two huge differences. Basically, no rules about paying the money out, and the ability to stay completely anonymous. Let's be crystal clear on what a DAF is. A donor moves their money, or stocks, or art, or crypto, into a DAF. Boom. They immediately get the biggest tax deduction the law allows. But the money doesn't have to go to an actual charity. It can just sit in that account for years, growing tax-free. The donor gets to advise where the money goes, but here's the kicker. There's no legal requirement for it to ever leave that account. So here's the playbook step by step. 1. You donate your assets. Get them off your personal balance sheet. 2. You claim an immediate and massive tax deduction paid for, in part, by the public. 3. You just park the money. You warehouse it indefinitely because there are no rules saying you can't. And 4, and this is crucial, if you do decide to give money to a cause, you can do it anonymously, no fingerprints, which is pretty useful if you're funding something politically controversial. And look, don't think for a second this is some niche strategy. The use of DAFs has absolutely exploded. The money sitting in these charitable holding tanks has ballooned to over $250 billion. That's up from $152 billion just 3 years earlier. That is $250 billion that somebody got a tax deduction for, but that hasn't necessarily reached a single soup kitchen or medical clinic. Okay, so this brings us to what this is really all about, the ultimate prize. Because this system isn't just about dodging taxes, it's about turning all that wealth into real, lasting political power. And the ultimate prize, the real crown jewel, according to our sources, is the justice system. And there's been a 50-year plan to capture it. Look, this didn't just happen. It's been in the works for a long, long time. You can trace it all the way back to the 1971 Powell Memo, which was basically a battle plan for corporations to fight back against government regulation. Then you fast forward to 2010, the Supreme Court's Citizens United decision hits the gas hard. It opens the floodgates for unlimited anonymous money in politics. That's when you see these dark money networks, like the one tied to Leonard Leo, raise hundreds of millions of untraceable dollars to systematically reshape our courts.
So how do they do it? Well, the machine they've built works on 3 main fronts. First, you handpick the players. Groups like the Federalist Society act as a pipeline, vetting and promoting judges who think the right way. Second, you control the story. You use groups like the Judicial Crisis Network, fueled by millions in anonymous DAF money, to run attack ads or support ads for judicial nominees. And third, once your judges are on the bench, you lobby them. You have a whole network of front groups that file these things called amicus briefs, which are basically legal memos telling the judges how powerful people want them to rule. And in case you're thinking this all sounds like some kind of conspiracy theory, well, don't take my word for it. Here it is straight from one of the guys who built the machine. Donald McGahn, the former White House counsel, he just said it out loud. Picking judges and getting rid of regulations are the flip side of the same coin. It was never just about the law. It was always about power and policy. So let's pull the lens back for a minute and look at the big picture here. Because what all of this reveals is a massive, fundamental paradox at the very heart of this whole idea of philanthropic capitalism. And you know, this whole contradiction, it's not new. It's practically baked into the DNA of modern philanthropy. Just look at Andrew Carnegie, the guy who basically invented the modern playbook. On one side, you have his famous gospel of wealth, preaching that the rich are just holding their money in trust for the public. But on the other side, this was the same guy whose company brutally crushed striking workers, who fought unions tooth and nail, and who paid rock-bottom wages in horrible conditions to make the very money he was so celebrated for giving away. See the disconnect? It's been there from the start. You know, there's a quote from an academic journal that I think just nails it. Philanthropy needs the world to stay an unequal place. In other words, for this whole system of billionaire giving to even exist, you first need a world with massive, gaping inequality. If the real goal was to fix the problems that cause that inequality, the whole system would essentially put itself out of business. Which leaves us staring at one final, really critical question. The very system that allows a handful of people to accumulate these vast fortunes is often the same one that creates the problems that philanthropy then tries to solve. So we have to ask, can the architects and the biggest winners of that system ever truly be the ones to change it? Or is that the ultimate deception?
So while markets rise and fall, systems like this quietly move billions behind the scenes, hidden from the public, hidden from scrutiny, and sometimes hidden from the law itself. Because in global finance, the most powerful forces are rarely the most visible. And this is just one of the systems used by the unseen elite.